She was being hanged for adultery. The mountain man cut the rope. If she sinned, then I sinned too. The mountain village lay silent under the early morning fog, the kind that hugged the cliffs and made the narrow paths treacherous. Small stone houses clung to the slopes, and smoke curled from chimneys like thin fingers reaching for the sky. Life in this village was harsh and unyielding. The villagers worked hard from dawn till dusk, tending their small fields, caring for livestock, and following the customs that had been passed down for generations. Every step, every word, every action was watched and judged by the community. In this place, tradition was law and law was absolute. Mistakes were not forgiven easily. Among the villagers, there was one who had been singled out for what they called a terrible crime. Layla, a young woman known for her beauty and kindness, had been accused of adultery. The rumor spread like wildfire, whispered from door to door, carried on the wind, until it became a certainty in the minds of the villagers. People had gathered in the small, open square at the heart of the village, ready to witness what they considered justice. Some were there out of curiosity, others out of a sense of duty, and a few because they secretly hoped no one would actually go through with the punishment. Layla had been brought to the square in the early hours. Her hands were bound tightly with rough rope, and her feet dragged along the dusty ground as the villagers forced her toward the execution post. Her face was pale, lips trembling, eyes wide with fear, but she held her head high, refusing to show tears. She had always been a proud girl, but today pride felt heavy, like a weight pressing down on her chest. Around her, children clutched their parents' hands, unable to understand why someone would be treated this way, and the elders whispered prayers and curses under their breath, each sure they were acting righteously. The square was small, no larger than a dozen steps across, yet it seemed enormous in that moment. Every eye was fixed on Layla as she was brought to the post. The villagers had stacked wood beneath the rope, preparing for the final act. The air smelled of smoke and dust, mixed with the faint tang of fear and anticipation. Birds had stopped singing, as if nature itself was holding its breath. The mountains surrounding the village rose high and silent, their peaks hidden in clouds, watching like old guardians who had seen centuries of human folly. Hidden among the trees at the edge of the square, a man watched quietly. Idris was a mountain man, known to the villagers but not fully understood. He lived alone in the forest, away from the strict rules and judgments that bound the village. People often whispered about him, calling him strange, a loner, or even dangerous, though none could say exactly why. Idris had learned to live with solitude. The forest was his home, the mountains his companions, and the silence his teacher. He had seen the village's cruelty before, the way people punished others to make themselves feel right, and it had always unsettled him. Today, however, something deep inside him stirred. As he watched Layla, tied and trembling, a sense of urgency filled him. He saw not only her fear but also the injustice of the situation. He could feel the anger of the villagers, their belief in absolute rules, and yet he also felt something stronger, the quiet, powerful call of what was right. Idris had always followed his own code, and today it demanded action. He could not stand by while an innocent life was destroyed to satisfy fear and judgment. The villagers began their chants, calling for the punishment to proceed. The rope around Layla's neck tightened slightly as the elders stepped forward to ensure everything was done correctly. She looked around at the faces surrounding her, some familiar, some barely recognized. She could see the certainty in their eyes, a certainty that left no room for mercy. And yet she also felt a strange flicker of hope, a tiny spark that maybe, just maybe, someone would intervene. Idris stepped closer, his feet moving over the uneven stones almost silently. He did not announce himself. He did not call for attention. He simply moved, guided by instinct and determination. From the corner of the square, some villagers noticed him, but they dismissed him at first, thinking he would not dare interfere. After all, who would risk the wrath of the entire village for one woman, especially someone so feared and isolated? Yet, as Idris continued to advance, a few onlookers began to murmur, a ripple of curiosity passing through the crowd. Layla's heart pounded in her chest. She could hear the whispers, the chants, the low murmurs of fear and expectation. Her hands shook within the ropes, her feet scraped the dusty ground, and her mind raced. She did not understand why she had been singled out, why her life had come to this point. She thought of her family, her dreams, and the life she had hoped to live. All of it seemed to vanish in the shadow of the post, in the cold, judging eyes of the villagers. Idris reached the base of the post. He looked at Layla, and she looked back at him. In that brief exchange, something passed between them, not words, not explanations, but a silent understanding. He was not there to lecture or argue. He was there to act. He knew the risk. He knew the anger he would face, and yet he felt no hesitation. His hand moved to the rope that bound her, the rope that would soon end her life if no one intervened. The villagers began to notice the change in the atmosphere. The chants slowed, the murmurs grew louder, and some elders stepped back uncertainly. They had never seen Idris act in this way. They could not predict his next move. Fear mingled with confusion. For a moment, the square was still, as if the mountains themselves were waiting to see what would happen. Layla felt a strange sensation, hope, perhaps, or the realization that someone was willing to stand for her. Her fear did not disappear, but it transformed into something different, a fragile thread of courage. She tried not to cry, tried not to falter, as she watched Idris approach the post. The rope around her neck seemed heavier than ever, yet there was a possibility now, a chance that someone could break the cycle of judgment that had trapped her. Idris reached the rope and examined it. He could feel its rough fibers under his fingers, feel the weight of the moment, the weight of the crowd, the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down on him. And then, quietly but firmly, he made his decision. This rope would not end her life. If she had sinned, he was willing to share that sin, willing to face the consequences himself. The thought filled him with resolve. He would not allow fear, tradition, or judgment to dictate right and wrong in this moment. The villagers watched in stunned silence as Idris prepared to act. No one spoke, no one moved, as if time had slowed and the world had narrowed down to this single act of defiance. Layla's heart raced, her mind spinning, her body trembling. She did not know if she should trust him, but something in his eyes told her that he would not let her die without a fight. She felt the tiniest flicker of hope growing stronger, replacing some of the fear that had consumed her. Idris raised his hand, ready to cut the rope, ready to challenge the village's harsh laws with a simple act of courage. The villagers gasped. Some shouted, some tried to stop him, but it was too late. The rope was about to be cut, and with it, the certainty of Layla's fate would be broken. In that moment, the mountains seemed to echo with possibility, the wind carrying a whisper of change. And so, in the shadow of the cliffs, surrounded by the silent peaks and the fearful villagers, Idris prepared to change the course of one young woman's life. It was a small act in the grand scheme of the world, but in this village, it was revolutionary. Layla, trembling but alive, looked at him with a mixture of fear, gratitude, and wonder. The future was uncertain, the path ahead dangerous, but for the first time that day, there was hope born not from rules or law, but from courage, compassion, and the willingness of one person to stand for what is right. The crowd fell silent as Idris's hand hovered over the rope. Every eye in the village square was fixed on him. Some villagers stared in disbelief, others in anger. None could move, none could speak. It was as if time itself had paused, waiting for the next moment to unfold. Layla's heart pounded so loudly she thought the entire village could hear it. Her body trembled from fear, but there was also something else now, a fragile glimmer of hope that she had not felt before. Idris took a deep breath, steadying himself. He knew that what he was about to do would not be understood by most people. In the eyes of the villagers, this was defiance, rebellion, even madness. Yet he did not waver. In his mind, he saw clearly. A human life was in his hands, and tradition was not always justice. If Layla had sinned, he was willing to share the blame. If she was guilty, then so was he, because he could not stand by and let fear dictate right and wrong. He looked at Layla, who was staring back at him with wide, terrified eyes. He could see her thinking, wondering who he was and why he would risk everything for her. He wanted her to know that he was not there out of pride or to prove himself, but because he believed in mercy, in fairness, in something greater than the rules that had bound this village for generations. Layla's chest rose and fell rapidly as she tried to catch her breath. Her fingers twitched in the ropes, and she wished, more than anything, that she could somehow free herself without getting him in trouble. But it was clear that Idris had already made the choice. Slowly, he reached for a small knife he carried at his belt. It was old, the blade slightly worn but sharp enough for what he intended. The villagers began murmuring, a low hum of fear and outrage. Some shouted warnings. "Stop him, he will pay for this." But Idris did not listen. His eyes never left Layla's. In that gaze, he promised her safety, even if it meant risking his own life. The rope had been tied tightly around her neck, ready to end her life at any moment. Idris took another deep breath, feeling the rough fibers beneath his fingers, feeling the history, the anger, and the fear pressing down on him. Then, with one clean, swift motion, he cut the rope. The tension snapped, the wood beneath Layla shifted slightly, and she collapsed into Idris's arms. The villagers gasped in shock, their mouths opening and closing without words. Some stumbled backward, unsure what to do, while others clenched their fists in outrage. For a moment there was absolute stillness. Layla lay trembling in Idris's arms, her chest heaving, tears streaming down her face. She could barely believe she was alive, that the rope had not ended her life. She looked up at Idris, trying to find the right words, but no words came. All she could do was clutch his arm, silently thanking him for his courage. Idris held her firmly, his own heart racing. He knew that their safety was temporary. The villagers would not allow this act to go unchallenged. Their anger and fear would soon erupt, and they might come after him, after both of them. But he refused to show fear in front of her. He wanted Layla to know that she was safe, at least for now, and that she could trust him. "You are safe," he whispered quietly, almost to himself as much as to her. Some villagers finally found their voices. They shouted at Idris, calling him names, accusing him of sacrilege, madness, and defiance. "How dare you interfere with the law?" an elder cried. "Do you not fear the consequences of your actions?" But Idris did not respond with anger. He remained calm, steady, and unyielding. "If she sinned," he said loudly so the crowd could hear, "then I sinned too. You may punish me if you wish, but I will not allow her life to end unjustly." The words shocked the villagers more than the act itself. They had never seen anyone take such responsibility for another person's fate. Some whispered among themselves, questioning their own beliefs for the first time. Others remained rigid in anger, certain that tradition must be enforced no matter what. Idris's bravery had created confusion, and confusion was dangerous in a place ruled by fear. Layla, still in his arms, felt something she had never felt before: trust. She realized that this man had put everything on the line for her, that he had stepped into the storm willingly. Her fear began to mix with gratitude and wonder. She whispered, Why are you helping me?" Idris looked down at her, his eyes steady. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said simply. "No one deserves to die because of fear and judgment. Not you, not anyone." The murmurs of the villagers grew louder. Some tried to reason with the elders, asking if this punishment was truly just. Others prepared to chase Idris and Layla if they tried to escape. The tension was like a heavy fog pressing down on the square, almost as suffocating as the ropes that had bound Layla moments before. Idris quickly helped Layla to her feet. She was weak and trembling, but she stood tall, leaning slightly on him for support. He guided her toward the edge of the square, toward the narrow path that led into the forest and the mountains beyond. The villagers shouted after them, but Idris and Layla did not stop. Every step was dangerous. Every moment could bring them back into the hands of those who would see them punished. But for the first time that day, Layla felt a sense of freedom. The path through the village was narrow and twisting, with houses and fences on either side. Some villagers tried to block their way, but Idris moved with surprising agility, guiding Layla safely past each obstacle. The crowd's shouting grew louder, some angry, some confused, some even calling for mercy, unsure if this punishment was truly right. The tension in the village square had turned into chaos, but Idris did not falter. He kept moving, kept Layla safe, kept his eyes on the forest where the mountains awaited. Once they reached the edge of the village, the forest welcomed them like a protective shield. The trees rose tall and thick, their branches intertwined, hiding Idris and Layla from view. The sunlight barely penetrated the canopy, creating shadows that seemed to swallow them whole. The smell of pine and earth filled the air, and for a brief moment the world seemed to hold its breath with them. Layla leaned against a tree, trying to catch her breath, her mind racing with disbelief. She had been moments from death, yet here she was, alive, guided by a stranger's courage. Idris stood beside her, watching the path behind them carefully. He knew the villagers would not give up easily. Some might follow, others might return to gather reinforcements. He also knew that their journey was far from over. Survival in the mountains required more than courage. It required skill, knowledge, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. But Idris had spent years living in the wilderness, understanding every tree, every rock, every hidden path, and today that knowledge would be their shield. As they moved deeper into the forest, Layla finally found her voice. Who are you?" she asked, still trembling. Idris looked at her, his face calm but serious. "I am someone who refuses to let fear decide who lives and who dies," he said simply. "I live in these mountains, away from judgment, but today I could not turn away." Layla listened, trying to process the words. She had never met anyone like him, anyone who acted without fear for what was right. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the crunch of leaves beneath their feet and the distant calls of birds. Layla's mind replayed the moments at the village square, the ropes, the shouts, the anger, and the sudden hope brought by Idris. She realized that life could change in a single moment, that courage could appear where it was least expected, and that sometimes salvation came from those we least expected. The sun began to climb higher, filtering through the trees and casting shifting shadows on the ground. Idris led Layla to a small clearing, hidden from view, where a clear stream flowed. The sound of water was soothing, a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind. Layla knelt by the stream, cupping her hands to drink. Idris watched her carefully, alert to any signs of danger, knowing that safety was temporary and vigilance was essential. For the first time in hours, Layla allowed herself to relax slightly. She realized that she was not alone, that someone had chosen to stand for her, to fight for her life when no one else would. She looked at Idris and whispered, "Thank you, I don't know how to repay you." Idris shook his head. "You owe me nothing," he said. "Your life is its own reward. Stay alive, stay strong, and learn from this moment. That is enough." The day stretched on, and as the forest provided shelter and protection, the bond between them grew. Layla learned to trust him, not blindly but with cautious hope. Idris showed her safe paths, hidden places to rest, and ways to move quietly through the trees. Every step was a lesson in survival, and every moment a reminder of the courage it took to act against fear and judgment. As night fell, the forest grew darker and quieter. Stars appeared in the sky, distant and cold, yet beautiful. Idris and Layla found a hidden cave to rest, its walls shielding them from prying eyes. Layla lay close to the ground, exhausted but alive, her mind replaying the events of the day. She realized that the man who had saved her was not just brave, but wise and compassionate, someone who understood the value of life in a way the villagers never could. Idris sat outside the cave, keeping watch, alert to any sound that might signal danger. The village was far behind them, but threats could come from anywhere. Yet in that moment, there was also a sense of peace, a small, fragile victory in a world that often valued rules over humanity. For both of them, the night was a time to breathe, to gather strength, and to prepare for the journey ahead, knowing that the mountains offered both protection and challenges. By the time the first light of dawn touched the treetops, Layla felt a sense of hope she had never known before. She had been saved from death by a man who had risked everything for her, and now, though danger still loomed, she felt the possibility of a new life, one where fear did not dictate her every step. Idris, ever vigilant, knew the path ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that courage, compassion, and careful planning could guide them through. And so, the mountain man and the young woman who had almost been hanged began their journey together, not just to escape danger, but toward a future that they would shape themselves, free from the chains of fear, judgment, and the harsh rules of a small, unforgiving village. The forest around them was thick and dark, filled with shadows that moved with the wind. Every branch and leaf seemed alive, whispering secrets that only Idris could understand. He led Layla carefully, his steps quiet but sure. He knew these mountains like the back of his hand, every path, every rock, every hidden trail. The villagers, filled with anger and fear, could never follow them here. This was Idris's domain, a place where the rules of the village did not apply, and where courage and skill were the only tools for survival. Layla followed him closely, her hands brushing against tree trunks for balance. Her legs were weak, her body tired from the events of the day, yet her mind was sharp. She had been moments from death, and now every step she took was a reminder that life was fragile, precious, and worth fighting for. She could still hear the shouts of the villagers echoing in her mind, but the sound grew fainter as they moved deeper into the forest. The world she had known, the one of rules, judgment, and fear, was behind her now. Idris moved silently, scanning the surroundings. "We must keep moving," he said softly. His voice was calm, but it carried authority. "The villagers may send searchers, and if they find us, they will not show mercy. We cannot stay in one place too long." Layla nodded, understanding the urgency. She had never imagined that a life she once took for granted could be in such danger. Yet with Idris, she felt a strange combination of fear and trust. He was strong, skilled, and fearless, and she knew that as long as she stayed close to him, she had a chance to survive. The first challenge came quickly. A narrow path led along the side of a steep cliff, the rocks loose underfoot, threatening to give way with every step. Idris stopped and studied the path carefully. "Hold my hand," he instructed. "One wrong step and it could be the end for both of us." Layla reached out, gripping his hand tightly. She felt his strength, steady and reassuring, guiding her with patience and care. Step by step, they crossed the dangerous path, the cliff dropping sharply below, the wind whistling past them. Layla's heart pounded in her chest, and her stomach lurched with every loose stone, but she did not falter. Idris's calm presence gave her courage she never knew she had. As they moved on, the forest grew denser, the canopy above blocking most of the sunlight. Shadows danced across the ground and strange sounds echoed in the distance. The snap of a branch, the rustle of leaves, the cry of a distant bird. Layla's senses were alert, every sound making her jump, yet she trusted Idris's knowledge. "Do not worry," he said, sensing her fear. "We are safe here, as long as we stay quiet and follow the paths I know." He led her through narrow passages, over streams and past hidden caves, always keeping an eye on the terrain, always planning for their safety. Hours passed, and the physical exertion began to take its toll. Layla's legs ached, her feet were sore, and the adrenaline that had kept her moving was beginning to fade. Idris noticed her fatigue and motioned for them to rest in a small clearing near a stream. The water was clear and cold, running over smooth stones, creating a gentle, soothing sound. Layla knelt by the water, cupping her hands to drink, letting the cool liquid refresh her body. Idris sat nearby, alert, scanning the trees for any signs of danger. "We can rest for a short while," he said, "but we cannot stay too long. Safety is temporary in these mountains." During this brief rest, Layla began to speak, her voice hesitant at first. I cannot thank you enough," she said. "You risked everything for me today." "Why would you do that?" Idris looked at her, his expression calm but serious. "Because it was the right thing to do," he replied. "No one should be punished for the mistakes of others or for rules that do not consider the truth. Today, it was your life. Tomorrow, it could be someone else's. Courage is not just for yourself, it is for those who cannot defend themselves." Layla listened, absorbing his words. She realized that he was not just brave, but wise, someone who understood the value of life and justice in a way the villagers never could. Their journey continued, the forest growing wilder and more challenging with every step. They climbed steep inclines, their hands and feet searching for grip on rocks and roots. They crossed shallow streams, careful not to slip on the wet stones. At one point, they encountered a small group of mountain goats. Layla froze, unsure if the animals would be dangerous. Idris simply smiled and guided her past them quietly, moving with the same ease and confidence that made the forest seem like a home to him. Each challenge tested their endurance, their focus, and their courage, yet with every obstacle they overcame, Layla felt stronger, more capable, and more alive. As evening approached, the temperature dropped sharply. The forest was colder than the village, and the shadows grew longer, darker, and more intimidating. Idris led Layla to a hidden cave he had used before, its entrance camouflaged by thick vines and rocks. "We can rest here tonight," he said. "It is safe, but we must remain vigilant." Inside the cave, they built a small fire from dry wood, the flames casting warm light on the walls and filling the air with a comforting smell of smoke. Layla sat close to the fire, warming her hands and body, while Idris kept watch near the entrance. That night, as the stars appeared through gaps in the canopy, Layla felt a mixture of exhaustion, relief, and awe. She had survived the village, the rope, and the anger of the people who wanted her dead. She had survived because of Idris, a man she barely knew but whose courage had saved her life. "Do you ever regret living alone in these mountains?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. Idris considered her question for a moment. "Sometimes," he said, "but solitude teaches you patience, observation, and the strength to act when needed. Today proved its value." Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by strange noises from the forest and the occasional rustle that made Layla's heart race. Idris remained vigilant, alert to every sound, every movement. She realized that survival was not just about courage, but also about awareness, planning, and trust. Idris had all of these qualities, and by following him, she felt that they could face anything the mountains might throw at them. When morning arrived, the sun's rays filtered through the trees, casting a soft golden light on the forest floor. Layla stretched, feeling sore but alive, her muscles stiff but her spirit renewed. Idris had already prepared a simple breakfast of roots, berries, and water from the stream. "We must eat and move quickly," he said. "The villagers will not give up easily. If they catch up, we cannot afford to be tired or slow." Layla nodded, understanding the seriousness of their situation. Each moment of rest was precious, each step forward vital. As they continued their journey, they faced more challenges. Thick underbrush slowed their progress, thorny bushes tore at their clothes, and uneven terrain tested their balance and endurance. Yet with Idris leading, they moved efficiently, avoiding obvious paths and using hidden trails that kept them out of sight. Layla learned to pay attention to the forest, to notice small signs that indicated which direction to take, which paths were safe, and which were dangerous. She felt her confidence grow with each step, realizing that she was not helpless, that she could survive if she stayed alert and trusted her guide. Along the way, they encountered signs that the villagers had sent searchers. Broken branches, footprints in the mud, and distant voices reminded them of the danger behind. Idris remained calm, guiding Layla quietly and swiftly through the undergrowth. "They may be searching, but they do not know these mountains like I do," he said. "We will stay ahead and we will survive." Layla took comfort in his confidence, trusting him completely, knowing that without him, they would not stand a chance. By late afternoon, they reached a hidden plateau, a small flat area surrounded by high rocks and dense forest. Idris motioned for Layla to rest again. "We are safe here for a while," he said. "We must plan our next move carefully. The mountains provide protection, but we cannot rely on luck alone." Layla sat down, exhausted but grateful, drinking from the stream and letting the cool water refresh her body. She realized that every challenge they had faced, every obstacle they had overcome, had taught her resilience, courage, and the importance of trust. As they prepared to move again, Layla looked at Idris with a new sense of admiration and respect. He was not just a man who saved her. He was a teacher, a guide, and a protector. She realized that the mountains, which had once seemed intimidating and dangerous, had become a place of learning, strength, and hope. And she knew that as long as she stayed with him, she could face anything. Their journey through the mountains continued, filled with danger, beauty, and lessons. Every step strengthened their bond, every obstacle tested their courage, and every moment reminded them of the fragility and value of life. They were no longer just a man and a woman fleeing danger. They were survivors, learning from each other and from the wild, preparing for whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun had barely risen when Idris and Layla continued their journey through the mountains. The forest was alive with the sounds of birds, rustling leaves, and distant streams. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the ground, giving the path ahead a mysterious and sometimes frightening feeling. But Idris moved with confidence, knowing the mountains well. Layla followed closely, her steps careful but steady. Despite the exhaustion of the previous day and night, she felt stronger, braver, and more alert. The mountains had tested them, but they had survived. However, safety was only temporary. The village would not forget so easily. Idris knew that search parties would soon be organized. The villagers were angry and humiliated, and they would come looking for them relentlessly. Idris scanned the path ahead, noticing broken branches and footprints that suggested someone had already followed them, though the tracks were old. "We are not safe yet," he said. "We must be ready for anyone who may try to stop us. The villagers will not give up and we must remain alert." Layla listened carefully. She was beginning to understand the seriousness of their situation. Survival was not just about running. It was about thinking, planning, and anticipating danger. She realized that Idris was not only brave but also wise. He had lived alone in these mountains for many years, learning the ways of the land and understanding how to move without being seen. Now, his knowledge was keeping her alive. As they moved deeper into the forest, they began to hear distant shouts. The villagers were not far behind, and some were shouting Layla's name, threatening to capture them. Fear ran through Layla, but Idris remained calm. "Do not panic," he said firmly. "They will come, but we are stronger here. We know the mountains. We will face them, but only if we must. For now, we move quietly and stay hidden." Idris led Layla to a narrow path that twisted through the rocks and dense trees. It was difficult to walk, but it was almost impossible for anyone unfamiliar with the mountains to follow. Layla stumbled a few times, but Idris caught her hand each time. "Stay close to me," he said. "Do not look back. Do not think of them. Focus on each step. That is how we survive." She nodded, feeling a sense of trust she had never felt before. He was her guide, her protector, and now her courage. By midday, they reached a small clearing near a stream. Idris motioned for Layla to sit, and she rested while he examined the area carefully. He noticed signs that someone had passed recently, a broken branch, footprints, and disturbed soil. "They are getting closer," he said quietly. "We may have to face them soon." "Are you ready?" Layla took a deep breath. She had been terrified before, but now she felt a new strength. "I am," she said softly. "I trust you." Idris nodded, satisfied. As they rested, Idris began to plan. He knew the villagers would not be content with merely following them. They would demand justice, and they would try to punish both of them. He considered their options carefully, weighing the risks of staying hidden versus confronting them. In his heart, he knew that hiding forever was not the solution. At some point, they would have to face the consequences of defying the village. And when that time came, they needed a plan. By late afternoon, the distant sounds of the villagers grew louder. Some were shouting, others were calling for reinforcements. Idris took Layla by the hand and led her to a higher vantage point, a rocky ledge overlooking the valley below. From this position, they could see the villagers moving through the lower slopes, searching for them. Idris turned to Layla. "We cannot avoid them forever," he said, "but we can control how we face them. You must be brave, and I will protect you. Together, we will show them that fear and anger are not the same as justice." Layla listened, her heart pounding, but she felt a new determination. She had survived the rope, the fear, and the chase. Now she would face the villagers with Idris, not as a helpless victim, but as someone willing to stand for what was right. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. As the villagers reached the base of the mountain, some of them spotted Idris and Layla on the ledge. They shouted angrily, waving sticks and raising their voices. "Come down. You will face justice," one elder called, but Idris did not move from his position. He stood tall, holding Layla close but giving her room to breathe. "If she sinned," he said loudly, "then I sinned too. You may punish me, but I will not allow her life to be destroyed by fear and judgment." The villagers froze, stunned by his words. None of them had ever heard such defiance. Some whispered to each other, questioning their own beliefs, while others shouted in outrage. The tension was thick, almost unbearable, as the two sides faced each other across the valley. Idris's calm courage stood in stark contrast to the villagers' anger, and Layla felt a strange mixture of pride, hope, and fear. For a long moment, no one moved. Then slowly, some villagers began to step back. They were hesitant, unsure if they could enforce the law against someone so brave. Others, still angry, tried to advance, but Idris remained steady. He did not threaten, he did not shout, he only stood firm, showing that his courage was not based on violence but on conviction. Layla, standing beside him, felt a surge of confidence. She realized that she was no longer just a victim. She was a witness to courage, a participant in this stand for justice. She raised her head and looked at the villagers, her eyes meeting theirs. She did not speak, but her presence was a statement. She would not be destroyed, she would not be silenced, and she would not be controlled by fear. Some villagers began to lower their weapons, realizing that this was not simply a battle of strength, but a test of morality. They saw Idris's courage, Layla's strength, and the injustice they had been about to commit. Slowly, the anger that had driven them began to fade, replaced by doubt and reflection. Could they truly punish someone for a mistake when others in the village had sinned without consequence? Could they allow fear to dictate right and wrong? The elders who had led the search stepped forward cautiously. "What do you say for yourself?" one asked Idris, his voice shaking slightly. Idris looked at them calmly. I say that justice is not fear, mercy is not weakness. If she has sinned, I take responsibility. But I will not allow the life of an innocent person to be destroyed for the comfort of others." His words echoed across the valley, clear and unwavering. The villagers listened in silence. For the first time, they were forced to question their own actions. Some lowered their heads in shame, realizing that their anger had blinded them. Others whispered quietly, agreeing that perhaps mercy was the right path. The tension remained, but a shift had begun. The power of courage, honesty, and compassion was stronger than fear and tradition. Layla took a deep breath. She could feel the weight of what had just happened. She had been moments from death, yet here she was, alive and standing. She looked at Idris with gratitude and admiration. He had not only saved her life, but had also taught her a lesson she would never forget. That true courage is standing for what is right, even when everyone else is against you. Idris guided Layla down the mountain carefully, keeping her safe and steady. The villagers, some reluctant, some still angry, followed at a distance but did not interfere. The lesson had been taught not with violence but with bravery and wisdom. Idris and Layla moved together, no longer just running, but walking toward a future where fear and judgment would not decide their fate. As night fell, they reached another hidden clearing where they could rest safely. Layla sat by the stream, her mind racing with everything that had happened. She had seen courage, defiance, and compassion all in one man. She realized that life could change in a single moment, that the choices of one person could ripple through the lives of many. Idris, watching over her, remained alert, knowing that the journey was not over, but also knowing that they had faced the greatest challenge so far, the confrontation with the villagers. The night was quiet except for the gentle sound of the stream and the distant hoot of an owl. Layla lay close to the fire, exhausted but alive, thinking of the lesson she had learned. Courage could inspire change. Compassion could disarm anger. And sometimes, standing up for what is right required risking everything. Idris had shown her that truth, and she would carry it with her forever. As the stars appeared, the mountains surrounding them seemed less intimidating and more protective. The world was still dangerous, the villagers still angry, but Layla had learned that fear could be met with bravery, hatred with compassion, and judgment with understanding. Idris had not only saved her life, he had given her a new perspective on the world, one that she would never forget. And so, under the quiet gaze of the mountains and the twinkling stars above, Idris and Layla rested, knowing that they had faced the villagers, survived the confrontation, and strengthened their courage. The path ahead was still uncertain, but they had proven that standing for what is right, even in the face of fear, could change lives and perhaps even hearts. The forest was quiet in the early morning, the sunlight filtering softly through the dense canopy of trees. Idris and Layla had rested well the previous night, their bodies sore from the long journey, but their spirits were stronger than ever. They had faced danger, fear, and judgment, and they had survived. But the mountains, while offering protection, were not their ultimate goal. The villagers, though shaken and uncertain, still lingered behind them. The question remained, what would become of Layla now, and could they ever find peace after such a trial? Idris led Layla through a narrow path that wound higher into the mountains, a trail few knew and even fewer dared to take. The air was cooler at this altitude, crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Each step was careful, deliberate. Layla felt her confidence growing, but she also knew that the journey was not only physical. It was also a journey of courage, trust, and understanding. She looked at Idris and realized that he had not only saved her life, but he had also taught her how to face fear with bravery and how to confront injustice with calm resolve. As they walked, Idris spoke quietly, almost as if sharing thoughts with the wind itself. "The villagers may never fully understand why I acted," he said. "Some may never forgive us, but that is not our concern. We have acted with honesty, courage, and respect for life. That is all that matters." Layla listened intently, absorbing his words. She realized that true courage was not about seeking recognition or victory, but about doing what was right, even when others disagreed. The path grew steeper, the rocks sharper, and the forest denser. Idris led Layla to a hidden cave he had used for shelter before. It was small but safe, with a clear view of the valley below and the forest paths. They stopped to rest, and Idris used the time to teach her how to move quietly through the forest, how to observe signs of danger, and how to rely on intuition as well as experience. Layla felt herself becoming more capable, more confident, and more determined to survive, not just physically but morally and mentally. Hours later, as the sun began to lower in the sky, Idris looked down into the valley and noticed movement. Some villagers were still searching, but their anger seemed to have softened. They moved hesitantly, unsure how to act against someone who had already shown such courage and moral clarity. Idris turned to Layla. "We will not run forever," he said. "Eventually, we must face them. But when we do, we must do so calmly, with truth and honesty. That is how we will change their hearts, not with fear but with integrity." Layla nodded, understanding that the final confrontation was coming and that she could not hide behind him forever. She would have to stand as well and show that she was not afraid. By evening, they decided to descend carefully toward the lower slopes, choosing a path that led to a hidden clearing near a stream. From this vantage point, they could see the village lights twinkling faintly in the distance. Idris spoke to Layla softly. "Tonight we rest. Tomorrow we will meet them, not as fugitives but as people who have acted rightly. It will not be easy, but truth and courage are stronger than anger and fear." Layla felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. The villagers had almost killed her, yet now she was about to face them as an equal, not as a victim. The night passed quietly, filled only with the gentle sound of flowing water and the distant calls of nocturnal birds. Layla and Idris took turns keeping watch, alert to any sign of danger. Layla reflected on everything that had happened, the accusations, the rope, Idris's bravery, and their flight through the mountains. She realized that her understanding of life had changed completely. She had learned that fear and judgment could be challenged, that courage could inspire change, and that one person's act of mercy could ripple across the hearts of many. At first light, they began their careful descent toward the village. The path was steep and narrow, but Idris guided her with patience, ensuring that each step was safe. As they approached the outskirts of the village, they could see the elders gathered, speaking in hushed tones. Some villagers stood behind them, hesitant, their expressions uncertain. They had been told of Idris's actions, of the courage he had shown, and many were beginning to question their own beliefs. The fear and anger that had driven them before were now mixed with doubt and reflection. Idris stopped at a safe distance and turned to Layla. "This is the moment," he said quietly. "We will speak, not shout. We will show them that mercy and courage are stronger than fear. Stand beside me and let your presence speak as loudly as my words." Layla nodded, her heart pounding. She was still afraid, but she also felt a strange strength within her. She had survived near death, she had fled danger, and now she would stand for herself, alongside the man who had saved her. They walked slowly into the clearing, visible to all. Idris spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "We have done no wrong in saving a life," he said. "To punish her for what you call a sin is not justice. It is fear, anger, and cruelty. If anyone is to be blamed, let it be me. But do not destroy her life in the name of rules that lack compassion." Layla stood beside him, her eyes meeting those of the villagers. She did not speak, but her presence reinforced Idris's words. She had survived, and she would not be destroyed. For a long moment there was silence. The villagers exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. Some had expected Idris to run, to hide, or to fight. Instead, he had shown courage without aggression, defiance without violence. Slowly, some villagers began to lower their heads, feeling shame for their earlier anger. Others whispered quietly, agreeing that perhaps mercy and understanding were the better path. The elders who had led the search stepped forward cautiously, their expressions a mixture of doubt and curiosity. One elder spoke, his voice trembling slightly. "You have acted bravely," he said to Idris. "Perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps justice is not only in punishment but also in mercy. We must reconsider our actions." Idris nodded, his face calm. "Mercy is never weakness," he replied. "It is strength. True courage is standing for what is right, even when it is difficult and even when others may not understand." The villagers listened in silence, reflecting on the truth of his words. Layla felt a sense of relief wash over her. The fear that had consumed her for so long was fading, replaced by hope. She realized that she had not only survived physically, but she had also witnessed the power of courage and truth. Idris had saved her life, yes, but he had also shown the villagers a better way to judge right and wrong. She felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for her life, but for the lesson she had learned, that courage, mercy, and integrity could change even the hardest hearts. The villagers slowly dispersed, some returning to their homes, others remaining to reflect on what they had seen. The anger that had driven them before had been replaced by quiet contemplation. They had witnessed bravery, selflessness, and moral strength, and many could not deny the impact it had on their hearts. Idris and Layla, standing together, had shown them that fear and judgment were not the only ways to live. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky with shades of gold and pink, Idris and Layla began their journey back toward safety, knowing that they had faced the greatest challenges and emerged stronger. The mountains, once a place of danger and survival, now seemed protective and comforting. They had learned from the forest, from each other, and from the journey itself. They were no longer simply a man and a woman fleeing danger. They were survivors, teachers, and examples of courage. By nightfall, they reached a hidden shelter far from the village, a place where they could rest without fear. Layla sat by the small fire, reflecting on everything that had happened. She had been moments from death, yet here she was, alive, safe, and filled with new understanding. Idris, sitting nearby, watched over her, calm and vigilant as always. Together they had faced fear, defied injustice, and found hope in the darkness. Layla looked at Idris, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Idris smiled gently. "The courage was not mine alone," he replied. "You survived, you stood, and you trusted. That is courage as well. Together, we have proven that life, mercy, and integrity are stronger than fear and anger." Layla nodded, feeling a sense of peace she had never known. She realized that their journey had not only saved her life, but had also given her a deeper understanding of the world and herself. As the stars appeared above the mountains, Idris and Layla rested, knowing that the journey was not only about survival, but about living with courage, compassion, and understanding. The mountains had tested them, the villagers had judged them, and danger had chased them. Yet in the end, they had stood firm, faced their fears, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more alive than ever before. The story of the mountain man and the woman who had almost been hanged would be remembered for generations, not as a tale of fear, but as a story of courage, mercy, and the power of standing for what is right, even when the world seems determined to punish those who dare to act with integrity. Layla and Idris had shown that one brave act could change lives, inspire hearts, and teach a village the true meaning of justice.